Welcome to Bongina Report Early Edition. Today we are joined by a special guest, Michael Knowles of The Michael Knowles Show. And I'm really excited for this conversation because Michael is somebody that I have been listening to for a really long time. He's one of those podcasters who you can credit with showing a lot of young people the political light because he arguably, I think, brings some of the most thoughtful commentary to the culture war. So with that, Michael, thank you so much for being here.
So thank you. That's very, very kind introduction. I appreciate it. I want to get that on tape so I can play it to myself every morning.
Of course. Well, okay, Michael, we talked a little bit before the show started about Thanksgiving. You're going home to your liberal family. I have liberal family as well. And I want to start off this show by playing this viral video that you made back in 2022 after Trump announced that he's running again. Producer Michael, can we play that?
Breeze drifting on by. You know how I feel. It's a new dawn. It's a new day. It's a new life for me.
So, you guys hear Trump's running again?
And I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good. Fish in the sea, you know how I feel.
If you're listening, you guys, you're going to see just a bunch of sort of stereotypical liberal-looking family members flipping out over Michael saying, "Did you hear that? Trump's running again." Awesome video. Michael, how contentious do you think this Thanksgiving is going to be for politically mixed families?
Well, that video you just played is a documentary, so that's entirely accurate and literally true. For most people, I actually don't think it's going to be all that difficult. Happily for me, I've known my family and my in-laws, for that matter, since I was a little boy. So they've come to terms with my being slightly to the right of Genghis Khan. For a lot of other families, though, I would say in 2016 and 2020, it was a lot tougher. And you heard all these accusations that Trump is a Hitler and you support the end of democracy if you voted for him or anything. I don't think you're going to see a lot of that this time. And you're not going to see that because most Americans voted for Trump, because 1 in 5 black guys voted for Trump, because 46% of Hispanics voted for Trump, because married women voted for Trump, because 40% of women under the age of 30 voted for Trump. Because I'm not saying everybody voted for Trump, but he won a good chunk, at least, of everybody. And so there's no argument to make here. You can't call him sexist. You can't call him racist. You can't call him a threat to democracy. It's all bunk. And so I think where the real turmoil is now, it's not really at your Thanksgiving table. It's in the boardrooms of CNN and MSNBC and all the leftists and the liars who were peddling total nonsense about Trump and who screwed up our Thanksgiving in years past. Those guys are the ones who are dealing with a reckoning right now. For most libs who are of good faith and who have even a couple brain cells to rub together, I think they're going to be like a number of members of my family, actually, who are very liberal, who hate Trump, but who said, you know, maybe we were missing something. If most Americans voted for this guy, something must have been off in our calculation.
I do think you're right that a lot of the Trump derangement seems to be from a very small minority of people on the internet. Like you said, the people on CNN, maybe the ladies of The View, even some crazies that get featured on Libs of TikTok. But most people, most normal people, are not that politically unhinged. I will say that there is a lot of disinformation around Thanksgiving and the holiday and why we celebrate it. And we've had that for a long time as a young person. I mean, I'm 24. A lot of us grew up hearing that America is inherently racist for a really long time, since we were in kindergarten. And I do have some friends and family who will say, particularly I have Native American family who will say, I'm not going to celebrate Thanksgiving. America's rooted in genocide and the exploitation of indigenous peoples. What's your response to people like that? Is the legacy of Thanksgiving in America actually racism?
Well, I don't know which Native American tribe you descend from, but if they were any members of the tribes around Plymouth Colony, then it's kind of strange that the descendants wouldn't celebrate Thanksgiving, because their ancestors did. Thanksgiving was a celebration between the Native American Indians and the English settlers. I am particularly interested in that holiday. I even have a cigar company named after that group of people, the Mayflower, because some of my ancestors came on the Mayflower. And so
Mine
I've
too.
taken yours as well. So you get both sides. I don't have any of the Native Americans in there, but it means that if you've got a personal connection, you've probably looked a little bit into the story here. And the story that the libs tell about Thanksgiving and the Pilgrims and the Indians is wrong and stupid, and it's disrespectful not only to the English, but also to the Indians. The way the libs tell this story, it was these poor passive Indians who were just all singing Kumbaya, and then the nasty English showed up and stole their corn and shot them all and gave them smallpox or something. And that's not really what happened. These Indians were serious men. They were real statesmen. They formed alliances with some of the English. I think especially of Massasoit, the head of what became the Wampanoag Nation. He made a really shrewd and prudent alliance with Governor Bradford, with men like Edward Winslow, who ended up saving Massasoit's life when Massasoit lay dying. Edward Winslow made him a broth, brought him back to health. Massasoit then confided in him that the Massachusetts Indians were seeking to destroy the Plymouth colony. So the Plymouth and the Wampanoags teamed up. They fought off some of the other Indians. It was to the benefit of the Wampanoag Nation. It was to the benefit of the Plymouth colony. I think it served the cause of justice. When the Indian-English relations really broke down, I'm so animated here, I'm knocking my lighter over on my desk. When the relations between the English and the Wampanoag broke down, it was really because of King Philip, a child of Massasoit, who mistakenly believed that the English had killed his brother. And there's really no evidence that it happened. His brother, I think, just got sick. And so this led to King Philip's War, which irreparably destroyed the relations in that area. And it was unfortunate. You like to think it might not have happened, but it doesn't erase everything that had happened for decades prior, and it doesn't diminish the humanity of the Indians, who were smart guys, who played good politics, who in many ways did the right thing. The real story is so much more interesting, so much richer than the ridiculous anti-American propaganda that the left tells us.
This show is sponsored by Cozy Earth. The ultimate Christmas gift is luxurious sleep. And with sheets or jammies from Cozy Earth, you and everyone you love will sleep in luxury. Cozy Earth uses only the best fabrics and textiles to enhance your life. I love Cozy Earth's bamboo sheet set. It is amazing. Michael loves them, especially because of how soft and cool it is. We moved from Wisconsin to Florida, and even when our air conditioner broke, Michael slept like a baby with Cozy Earth sheets. Cozy Earth sheets are so breathable, you'll sleep several degrees cooler. They are made with durable weave fabric that won't pill, guaranteed for 10 years. Create a sanctuary within your home. With Cozy Earth, you can transform your space into an elevated haven where serenity and renewal intertwine effortlessly. Cozy Earth prides itself on the responsible production of its products. Cozy Earth bedding and bath products have a 10-year warranty. That's how much Cozy Earth believes in them. Wrap the ones you love in luxury with Cozy Earth. Visit cozyearth.com/Evita, that's Evita, and use my exclusive 40% off code Evita to give the gift of luxury this holiday season. That's cozyearth.com/Evita. If you get a post-purchase survey, say you heard about Cozy Earth from Bongino Report Early Edition with Evita podcast. And you just think, what other country in the world has a holiday dedicated to giving thanks? It's really a beautiful thing that we have here, and that it's demonized by mostly the education system and also the culture is just terrible. And I wonder, Michael, what do you think we should advocate for, if you're a parent, if you're a grandparent, you're interested in the school system, to kind of root out this rot that is misinforming so many young people about our history, about our heritage, and just about what it means to be an American, and especially this holiday?
Well, I think you've really hit the nail on the head here. The other reason the libs hate Thanksgiving is because they hate God. And Thanksgiving is all about giving thanks to God for his blessings, for his providence, for being who he is. And so, right there, you get to the heart of the educational rot in America, which is that in the middle of the 20th century, they took the Bible out of schools and prayer out of schools. The Supreme Court did this for no reason whatsoever. There was no constitutional justification for it. It was because of radical leftist advocacy, which had gone on for decades. But the very fact that Thanksgiving occurred and that we celebrated Thanksgiving, that George Washington then, after the founding era, established this Thanksgiving proclamation and holiday, and that it has persevered throughout America, it reminds us that we're a nation founded to be Christian, and we're a nation founded to give thanks to God. The Pilgrims were extremely zealous Christians of a certain kind. The Puritans who followed them, I think of John Winthrop, well, he established that colony to be a model of Christian charity, as a shining city on a hill, as Ronald Reagan liked to quote. In God We Trust is on our money. It's in our national anthem. It's in the Star-Spangled Banner, and it's just a Christian country. I don't know how else to put it. So the libs want to deny that, and one way they deny that is by pulling the Bible and prayer out of schools. They do this because they say that America is supposed to be secular or atheist or something like that, but it can't be. Also because the purpose of education is to make students smarter and better behaved and in greater control of their passions and able to make sense of their freedom. It is simply not possible to be educated if you haven't read the greatest book and most important book ever written. It's just, even if you're a huge atheist, it's just not possible to call yourself an educated person if you are not familiar with the most influential book of all time, namely the Bible. And then furthermore, it is not possible to have a good education if you set out divorcing yourself from the source and summit of all truth, namely God. So that's why the education system has really cratered exactly over the period of time since we've removed the Bible from schools. What should we do about that? One, you're seeing people homeschool more and more, as my family does, as many families do. You're seeing the growth of charter schools and private schools and even homeschool pods that are kind of hybrids between homeschooling and private school. But now you're seeing a big push from the Trump administration to reform the education system. You're seeing a push from Ryan Walters out of Oklahoma to put the Bible back in schools. I think that's fabulous. You're seeing a push to include more Christian aspects in their curricula in elementary schools. So it's happening. People realize that education as we've known it for 70 years is a total flop. You know, even just in the 40-year period since we've had the Department of Education, we've seen America's test scores decline. American students have gotten stupider and less educated. So education hasn't been achieving its ends. Time to try something new.
I couldn't agree with you more about God being taken out of the school system and that being the root of the problem. I went to Catholic school growing up, so I always had a Christian perspective. And then I went to a secular college, the University of Chicago, and suddenly I was reading Foucault and Derrida, and I was really confused. What am I looking at? What am I dealing with? And I knew that there was something wrong with the conclusions that were being drawn by these sort of postmodern fake philosophers that were being thrown at me, but I couldn't exactly articulate what it was. And so then one of my first essays, I asked my professor, can I write about why truth exists? Because it was just it was the inherent, I think, problem with everything that I was reading. And then she said, well, I don't think that's a very interesting question. And then I realized, oh, okay, so I'm not coming to school to learn or pursue the truth at all. And I think you're right. The reason that that's happened over the years is because there is no grounding in religion or a higher power and orienting toward Christ in our school system like it has been for hundreds of years during the Middle Ages when the university system was first created. And I wonder, America's changing a lot. You know, we're seeing this growth of populism, not just here, but also abroad, in the West, or in Western Europe and Eastern Europe, even in Japan. And some places where I see it being really successful are places like Hungary, even like the Vox Party in Spain, where they're really leaning into their Christian heritage, where it's a populist movement of the people, but there is a deep respect and a desire to return to the mores of their past, of their founding. What do you think we can do to incorporate that in this new American populist movement? Because I love Tulsi Gabbard, I love RFK Jr., I love this new coalition that Trump's creating, and at the same time, I can't help but notice that the Christian founding seems to be somewhat missing from it.
Yes, the current American right is united by basically one thing, which is our revulsion at castrating children. That's about it. And I don't mean to diminish that. I find it genuinely revolting. But we're not even united by our revulsion at transvestitism or something like that, because there are plenty of people in there who seem to have no problem with transgenderism. You know, you can castrate yourself as long as you're 17 years old first, you know, then consenting adults can do whatever they want or whatever they say. And that's totally crazy. So it is distinctly an anti-woke coalition. And it really pretty much just comes down to that one issue. We disagree over tariffs and trade, immigration to some degree, feminism, everything. You know, we disagree over how we take our coffee, but that's the one issue that unites us. So at a certain point, we're going to have to be for something. And I think you're quite right that a serious, good, popular movement is going to have to be grounded in God. It's going to have to be, it's going to have to spring from the Christian heritage of our country and of our whole civilization. You mentioned Hungary, you mentioned the Vox Party in Spain. I think even of the major Polish resistance during the Soviet Union, during Soviet oppression, you had 2 million people show up for Mass as Pope John Paul II is saying Mass, and they chanted 3 simple words: "We want God." It's really as simple as that. So I think that's what we need. Trump has this amazing political ability to bring together people who have differing and even opposing views. I even just think on economic policy. So many of his top economic advisors are in favor of tariffs. Then one of the most brilliant surrogates and supporters for Trump this cycle, Vivek Ramaswamy, has campaigned actively against tariffs. He still is in favor of a freer kind of trade. So what does Trump do? Does he tell the tariff guys to pound sand? Does he tell Vivek to get lost? No, he brings both of them together and has them play to their strengths. So he does still have pro-tariff people in serious economic positions, now notably as Treasury Secretary, but then he puts Vivek in charge alongside Elon Musk of DOGE, which is all about cutting red tape, cutting regulation, tearing down these inefficient government agencies. He has people doing the things that they are good at. I think of his national security advisor, Mike Waltz. Mike Waltz is kind of squishy on domestic issues, but domestic issues don't really matter if you're in the position of NSA. You look down the list, Trump is good at bringing together these sorts of opposites. But then once President Trump gives us the reprieve, you know, once I really give thanks to God that he saved us from what I think would have been a truly damaging administration had Kamala won. And not to mention humiliating if we had that woman leading our country. But, you know, we got this reprieve. Okay, we get the reset. We clear out some of the government nonsense. We push some of the radical policies out of our government. Okay, now what are we for? You know, you've got the libertarians, the neocons, the traditionalists, the this, the that. You get 100 conservatives in a room, they're going to find the one thing they all disagree on. I once heard these obscure political monikers referred to as the right-wing version of gender pronouns. Everyone seems to have their own. But so what can we all agree on? I think ultimately it has to come back to a classical conception of politics. It has to come back to the natural law, at least, which is we want to do good and avoid evil. And if you want to know how to do that, if you want to have a coherent version of that, then it's got to come down to, at the very least, we should all agree we love God, we're pro-God, we want more good, less evil. Go forth, Western soldier.
Yeah, and something that makes me sort of optimistic about everything that you just said is, okay, we need God. How do we get him to be part of this movement? How do we incorporate our founding heritage, our Christian founding heritage, into this populist new uprising that we're seeing in America and across the West? And I think you covered this on your show as well, and I covered it on mine, that young Catholic girls are bringing back chapel veils. I think it was an article in the Free Press talking about it, which was really, it was awesome for me to read because I've been wearing a chapel veil for a while now before the article came out, even to the Novus Ordo Mass. And I think it's a symbol that a lot of young people especially are thirsting for tradition. They are thirsting for a much more militant form of Christianity than we've seen in the past, that's sort of going through the motions, not very zealous. And I wonder if you've noticed that too, and if you think there's a way to sort of harness this desire in young people for a much more Christian lifestyle.
Yes, first, Be Still My Beating Heart with the mantillas. I absolutely love them. They're traditional and they're beautiful and they're scriptural and they're great.
And by the way, can I just say that if you're a Protestant, you can also wear a chapel veil. It's a Christian tradition. It's not just Catholic. Sorry, go ahead, Michael.
It is. And so when you bring this up, what are people seeking here? You say it's a more militant kind of Christianity. And sure enough, there probably are too many pacifists in the church militant. That's what we are here on earth. But even more than militancy, I think what people want is a fuller expression of Christianity. They don't want their religion to be just one little thing they do for an hour on Sunday, if that. But they want to really live the fullness of truth. And how do we do that? First of all, why do people veil in church? It comes from St. Paul. St. Paul tells women to do that, and it comes from 2,000 years of church tradition, and it comes from a kind of modesty and a humility, and it's really just beautiful. But then furthermore, why are you seeing a revival of a fuller liturgy? In the Catholic Church, you have the revival of the traditional Latin Mass, the Mass of the Ages, of statistically most or all of the saints. But even in Protestants, I think, are seeking out more liturgical traditions, and the Eastern Orthodox as well. Why? Why is that? It's because, well, religion looks like something. Religion is not just something we do in our minds. It's one of the particular heresies of our modern age, that we think our body has nothing to do with who we really are, and we think that time doesn't matter. For instance, to use the popular example, we now think that we can be the opposite sex, that our body doesn't affect our identity. And that's just not true. We're incarnate creatures. We're hylomorphic beings, body, soul, and spirit. And so we're mortal. We live in time and space. And so we got to do stuff. The iconoclasts want to get rid of all of the images, all of the aids to our worship. They say, forget about all imagery. But then you just close your eyes, even if you're in a totally sterile room, you're going to have some image of God. That's just how we're human beings. We communicate through symbols. We like smells. We like bells because we need sacraments, in fact, because we need the meeting of the physical and the metaphysical, just as we are the meeting of body and spirit. These things are just inevitable. And there's an irony, especially as we talk now about Thanksgiving, that as we've tried to get rid of holidays, feast days, we see them come back. A priest friend of mine made this point just last Sunday. Some of my ancestors, your ancestors as well, who were puritanical, who wanted to get rid of all the feast days. You think the Pilgrims at Plymouth, they wanted to cancel Christmas and Easter. They said, no feast days, it's pagan, it's outrageous, it's anti-Christian. And then what do? They are responsible for the establishment of one of the most prominent, famous feast days in the world. It's not a traditional Christian feast day. They just made their own feast day to celebrate their own actions, and I don't knock them for it. Feast days are natural. They're not something to be avoided. We want good feast days to celebrate God. We don't want bacchanals like the ancient pagans had. We don't want to be, pulling people's hearts out of their chests and rolling them down Tenochtitlan as the Aztecs did. We want good feasts, but feasts in themselves are a good thing. Images in themselves are a good thing. Signs and symbols, these can be very, very good things. We are human beings. We are fundamentally religious creatures, and we are going to express our religious longings one way or the other. Might as well be in a way that is conducive to our sanctification and ultimately to knowing God and worshiping Him forever.
There's something so beautiful. I mean, you're talking about feast days, and I'm thinking about, I don't have a Latin Mass in my area anymore, but I used to when I was in high school. I used to sing in the Latin Mass choir. I also went to Latin Mass in Chicago, and then Cardinal Supich shut down my church, which sucked.
Yeah.
He's probably the worst cardinal in America. I'm just going to say it. He sucks. But it was really wonderful to have all of these feast days. And not only did we celebrate as a community, but we brought the feast days out into the community. We would process through the streets in honor of whatever respective, Christian holiday we were celebrating. And you don't see that anymore. You really don't. And I think that is something that we could bring back. I think so. The really traditional churches will do it, but even Protestant sects and more, secular Catholic churches should be processing through the streets and making a show of our faith instead of rescinding into the shadows and I don't know, pretending like we don't have a role to play openly in society. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Michael?
I totally agree with you. We do processions at my parish. It's a little bit more of a traditional parish, and so we'll do the beating the bounds. And I remember we were doing the beating the bounds, where you walk the whole perimeter of the parish. And a Protestant came. It was an Anglican who said that he wanted to bring this back to his Protestant parish because it's so beautiful, and it not only unites a parish, but it's also an evangelizing activity, and it recognizes what we've been talking about, which is that we're flesh and blood and we move in time and space, and religious life is not just something you think about in your head or something you feel in your appetites. Religious life is something you do. And faith without works is dead, and you do judge the tree by its fruit. And so you want to be fruitful, and you want to evangelize, and we don't do it alone. Where two or more are gathered, that's where our Lord is. This is not to say that we don't have private prayer, but this is to say that we are the mystical body of Christ, that's a corporate kind of thing. And that's very offensive to our highly individualistic and Gnostic age, but them's the facts, kid. So, we have to recognize this fact and get on out there. I think Barack Obama was particularly malignant when he shifted the rhetoric around religion. Not only did he go after sue nuns and try to force a radical atheist agenda on a lot of people, but he spoke of freedom of religion in this highly individualistic way, freedom of worship, because we can worship in our own heads, locked up in our homes, away from everyone else. That's not what religious freedom is really supposed to be. That's certainly not the religious tradition in America. Religion is the kind of thing that happened in public. Even the First Amendment, which prohibits the establishment of a church at the national level, did so in large part not so that we could have a total separation of church and state, but because many of the states had already established churches at the state level. And those establishments endured for decades after the ratification of the Constitution. So religion is a public thing. This is why the war on Christmas matters. The leftists like to make fun of conservatives for caring about, whether or not we have Christmas ornaments in the public square or even on our coffee cups. And they say, oh, who cares? It's so trivial. But I think, you guys obviously care. You are the ones who have undertaken decades of campaigning to take Christmas out. The fact that you insist on saying happy holidays at a time when we're all just talking about Christmas, are you going to wish me a happy Arbor Day? Or are you going to wish me a happy Kwanzaa? Give me a break. It's ridiculous. The left classically wages the culture war. They're the belligerents in the culture war. And then the minute that we respond, they look at us like we're weird. They force husky men into the little girl's changing room at the public pool. We object to that, and they say, why are you so focused on sex? We're not focused on it. You're the ones who did it. We're just reacting to your predations. But they know that symbols matter, that signs matter. They know that if you route religion from the public square, then it's going to be a lot easier to affect a leftist agenda. So we got to make sure it's public. Get out there, process, evangelize, say Merry Christmas. Live your religion in your whole life, because we're one unified person. You can't be one person inside your little head and then a totally different person with your body.
To your point, Michael, I think that the Establishment Clause did a lot of real damage to this country and how we perceive ourselves. Are we a Christian nation? Are we a country free from religion? And I get into this debate a lot with my husband, who self-identifies as a libertarian, and he really thinks that there should be no real, I think, Christian symbolism or profession at the state or the federal level, and I wonder, as we think about places like Hungary and Spain, like we talked about, how can we ever reclaim our identity as a Christian country, be a good moral nation as the founding fathers intended us to be, if our government is hell-bent on, I guess, creating a moral equivalency between, say, Christianity, the Catholic Church, and then the Church of Satanism that will erect altars in state houses because they have the same rights as Christians do now. And so I wonder, what is your argument against, or maybe for, libertarianism, and how we can push back against that wing of the new Trumpian party that we are looking at?
Well, I didn't realize you were in a mixed marriage. That's very broad-minded of you, a conservative and a libertarian.
I know.
I love my libertarian friends, and they've been an important part of a conservative coalition for a lot longer than Trump's been on the scene. I mean, this goes back to at least the 1950s and really even earlier than that. However, libertarianism is a species of liberalism, and it's a more classical kind of liberalism, or it develops out of a more classical kind of liberalism, but it's still liberalism. And so it shares the same premises liberalism shares. And what liberalism implies is skepticism, that we can't ever really come to terribly firm conclusions. We always need to keep our mind open. Liberalism asserts that the individual is fundamental in society. Classical political philosophy, conservatism, says that the family is the fundamental political unit, because political means public. It's more than one person. But liberalism says, no, it's really about the family. Liberalism views politics primarily through a lens of rights and entitlement, rather than, as the conservatives do, a lens of duty and obligation and tradition. Not to say that we don't have rights, but we're born, not to quote Kamala Harris, not to fall out of a coconut tree. We're born into families, and we have obligations to our parents and to our siblings and to all of our communities. So libertarianism and conservatism, though on the surface they seem kind of similar, they really differ quite radically in premises. So it makes perfect sense for someone who comes from the liberal tradition to say, well, we can't come to conclusions, certainly not about God or metaphysical matters or morality, and certainly not at the federal level. Could you imagine if that power fell into the wrong hands, as it already has for at least 70 years, and we look at the consequences of that. But I guess I would point to that fact to rebut liberalism and that skepticism. I would say, look, if we're going to have laws at all, then we're going to have to come to certain conclusions. To quote a former president of Yale, who was himself kind of a liberal, skepticism has utility only when it leads to conviction. And to quote Chesterton, we open our minds for the same reason we open our mouths, to close it on something solid. So, we have to come to certain conclusions and certain exclusions. Why is it wrong to commit murder? Well, because we can explain it by way of the natural law, because every other culture has come to the conclusion that it's wrong to commit murder. We just kind of know it as a first principle of practical reason. It's wrong because man is made in the image and likeness of God. And so whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. We have some religious reasons, but we're going to have a law against murder, or we're going to legalize murder. And there are going to be moral and ultimately religious premises that we conclude that are going to lead us to that point. So it's not really a question between having a religious nation or a secular nation. It's what kind of religious nation are we going to have? What God are we going to worship? What is our moral foundation going to be? It's a safe rule that the libs are wrong about everything. Even when it seems like they're right, they're still wrong in their reasoning. So if you find yourself, if your husband, to whom I mean no disrespect, if your libertarian husband finds himself agreeing with the libs on certain foundational premises, I was a libertarian once in my young life too, okay? We've all been there. We've been through a phase. But if you find yourself agreeing with them on certain basic premises, it's time to check your premises, because they're wrong about pretty much everything.
Michael, so insightful. I really appreciate you joining us today. I want to be respectful of your time. So where can people go to follow you and to listen to your show?
They can go find all my links to everything I do at michaeljknowles.com. I have the Michael Knowles Show at the Daily Wire, some other series there. The book club at PragerU. I have my Mayflower cigars. Speaking of Thanksgiving, you can get those at mayflowercigars.com, though you have to be 21 years old or older to order. Some exclusions apply. I don't know. I sell a bunch of stuff. I have candles. I don't know. I have a lot of combustible products. The body is a temple, and the temple needs incense. And I thank you so much for having me on and for the invitation, and to be used as a pawn in an argument that you've been having with your husband. I greatly appreciate the opportunity.
You 1,000% were used as a pawn. It was discussed before the show. I'm like, I'm going to ask Michael Knowles about this. He'll give us the answer. And I knew you would agree with me. So it was a good choice on my part, a good question. Thank you so much for being here, Michael. To all of you listening, thank you so much for tuning in. This interview was a first for us at the Early Edition. So drop a comment. Let me know if you enjoyed this collab and if you'd like to see more crossover shows like this. Also a reminder that there will be no show tomorrow or Friday, but we will be back on Monday. I'll see you all next week.